Good morning. Today I would like to submit my Curriculum, Values and Beliefs assignment to Jacqueline Towell on this January 31st, 2016 as a podcast. So let's begin. Curriculum, what does it mean to me? That was kind of the question that was put before us. So in this podcast, I am going to answer some questions, and hopefully by the end of it, you will understand what I think curriculum is and what it means to me. So we had learned in class quite a bit about curriculum, and I really loved the framework that we looked at. The ABC curriculum resources were fabulous. I spent a lot of time on that site. So in exploring that site and looking at some other definitions that are out there of curriculum, these were three pieces that I took away that were important to me. And one of them was when they referred to curriculum as the means and materials with which students will interact for the purpose of achieving identified educational outcomes. That really spoke to me, the means and materials portion, and a set plan of experiences encountered by the student in a classroom setting. Again, the word experiences stood out to me there. And curriculum refers to any course of study that is used to teach an idea or an academic subject. And there, again, course of study, about following the course of study. How are we going to get our students to really engage and connect with the curriculum? That's the big piece. We know they need these things to go forward and to be successful in the industry, but how do we get them to, take ownership and really connect with the curriculum? So that's what I took from that, and that's what I look at. So to me particularly, curriculum to me is a supportive direction to a vision for learning. It's all about providing rich experiences for the student through the way I deliver my instructional techniques. How am I going to engage the student? And using the means and materials that I have put before me to help the student. I want them to achieve the outcomes of the course when we're teaching them, because it's all about the student's success. So taking these things into consideration is the way I look at curriculum. So here are some examples. So when I look at the objectives and I investigate a way to bring this material alive for the student, one of the things is planned experiences. So I try to put a lot of that into my lesson planning each week if possible. So one of the big things I really enjoy is collaborations. I do quite a few collaborations, some within the school, some within the actual program. Sometimes it's outside of the program. For instance, I do with microbiology, I do a whole plaque experience where I collaborate with Joyce Myers and her students in the food micro lab, which is the School of Science and Engineering. We go into the lab, and her students will provide the microscopes, and they mount the slides for us. We take plaque and we mount it on the slides, and then both sets of students will collaborate in making this slide, putting it under, observing it, and then making notes and just having that discussion, and they both learn from the experience. So that's a pretty neat one that we enjoy. We do that in our microbiology. Another one is I bring in guests from other programs to speak. So in my activation coordination gerontology program, for instance, in the communications course, I will bring in a communicative disorders assistant from that program, OTA, PTA. Sometimes I'll touch base there. This semester, I'm bringing someone in from the developmental services worker program to talk about intellectual disabilities to the students. And I find the students really get a lot of value from that, and I get really great positive feedback about how much they learn from the expert in the field. I also like to bring in previous students to talk to the current students, because again, it's like a Q&A session, and then they just tend to be able to ask questions, and they get real life examples. So that seems to be working, the collaborations piece. Another one is I bring activities in the classroom to bring the content alive, and I'm lucky enough to teach histology in the dental programs. Very difficult course. A lot of students get very anxious about histology. So to relieve the anxiety, I try to create a really relaxed atmosphere in the classroom, various ways, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, on another assignment. But one of the things I do is, for instance, when we're talking about embryology and development of the embryo, it's a complicated process because the embryo, as it grows, goes through a folding process, and several layers of the tissue then, morph into something else. There's a lot of differentiation happening. So it tends to confuse the students. So I bring in Play-Doh. And so each color of Play-Doh represents a layer, a germ layer that's developing. And so when they get their hands on the Play-Doh and they start to lay out the layers, and then they see how the folding develops and how certain layers that were once on the inside are now on the outside, those kind of concepts really come alive for them, and that whole Play-Doh experience can sometimes make the difference, break the deal, if you know what I mean, for some people if they miss that class, because it really is an amazing experience and they learn a lot from that. And they're able to apply that knowledge then to the testing material. And that's what it's all about, making sure the student feels comfortable and is successful in achieving those outcomes. So that's one of the ways I work on that. Another one is discussions about subject matter. So I like to relate the content to real world. So I share my experiences. Again, I cross-teach 2 programs. So in the dental program, I have 28 years in private practice. So I will share the experience with the students. They really like that. Feedback often will say they like that component, that I apply what's going on in the classroom and the importance of it, and how it's going to apply to them in the real world. Because I find if they can't put a connection, they just aren't going to pay attention or take any kind of responsibility for those pieces of learning. So by making it come alive through real life experiences, that seems to help through the private practice. And same with activation coordination. I often, again, will speak about my internship. What did I do during my internship and the things I discovered, and relating that to the students. And they really seem to appreciate that. And it just helps them connect to the actual outcomes and why we are learning this information. So I will sometimes pull out the actual outline or even the program guide and say, hey, this is why we're learning this information, because you want to be able to achieve these outcomes when you graduate. And I talk to a piece about using this information on their resume, how it will carry forward. And the employers, they want to see that you can do these things. So once they see that connection, they seem to really own it and get involved. And it gets me excited. So I want them to have the same excitement and passion for the topics we're talking about each week. So one of the things you had asked us to do is take 2 curriculum model favorites. So I just grabbed 2 from the model. They were all excellent. I could have spoke to all of them. I really enjoyed that piece. So learners, I chose learners and stakeholders. So I chose learners because, again, in this model we were studying in class, the ABC framework, it stated that the learners are at the center of the curriculum process. So we are curriculum planners, and again, it's our job to consider characteristics of the learners that are before us. And we have to think about what are their experiences, what are their learning preferences, and their abilities, because again, we're seeing a varied range of abilities in the classroom now, and age as well. So I might have a student that's 17, I might have a student that's 47 in the classroom when it comes to some of the courses we're in. So we have to look at creating learning activities and resources that are relevant to them and useful to them. So the model talked about responsibility on our part as an educator to develop these evaluation strategies that would allow the learner to demonstrate their achievement of learning outcomes. And it speaks again to the course outline. So that's why I chose this piece, because I really believe this is true, like I just explained on the last slide before us here, how important it was. The learner, they really are at the center of the curriculum process, and we need to make sure we are creating an environment and outcomes that are realistic and that they can achieve and that are real world applicable. So why is this component important to me as an educator? Again, I find myself constantly looking, and I'm coming to realize that curriculum needs to be updated often and looked at, and making sure that we are teaching in the right domain for the learner. I've learned that, if they're in first semester, versus fifth semester, their abilities are going to be different, and we need to foster that over time. And we can't just throw huge pieces of information at them. We need to have a plan in place. And again, sometimes the verbs that are used maybe are not the best. And so maybe it's good to visit curriculum on a regular basis, yearly, with the team, and hopefully, make our curriculum stronger. So this component is important to me as an educator because it's an important role I have in shaping the students before me, and I really take that seriously. I take a lot of pride in what I do, and so I strive to create a really inviting atmosphere and come up with creative ways, for them to learn in hopes that it'll inspire them and they'll take interest in the subject and want to learn more. And in regards to learning more about the learner aspect, I really pay attention to their feedback, and I try to tailor my approach with each cohort. And what I mean by that is because, just before mid-terms, I try to do the start, stop, continue, and the feedback you get from that is valuable because you'll quickly find out they're not liking something or they're loving something. So, for instance, I decided to use student success handouts. And basically, they're just the usual handout that you would give to students, but previous cohorts didn't really take to them, and they didn't use them, and they didn't perform as well as I had hoped. And so I thought, I'm going to rename these handouts. And so I started calling them student success handouts. And boy, all of a sudden, everybody wants one, everybody's doing them, and I'm seeing a real improvement in, interest in the subject and also better performance on the testing. So that was cool to see that happen. So I try to change things up as needed and stay flexible because as long as we are meeting those outcomes, how we get there is a journey. And I find each cohort I've taught is slightly different. And so sometimes I need to tweak things, change things. Sometimes you'll try something in the classroom and it's like an epic fail, but that's okay. I have to look at the things that worked well. I take time to reflect each day after I teach, and I make notes of what worked and what didn't. So I'm hoping that'll help when we come to the point where we start to revisit the curriculum every now and again, and we can apply things that work and take out some things that maybe didn't. And we do that as a of course. So then we get to the stakeholders portion, and I put this one because with developing activation coordination gerontology from the start, as you're aware, that was quite an experience building the curriculum. So we're getting this curriculum. We get help from individuals and groups that are from the industry and that are, experts in the field. And hopefully we look at different perspectives and we share information. It also helps us identify sources that are out there that we can, resources we can tap into. So experts in the matter, potential employers, students, reps from the community, faculty, this sort of thing. And we brought everybody together, and it was just an amazing process to see how activation, coordination, and gerontology came alive. And another piece to this is the PAC, the Program Advisory Committee, again, bringing together labor and educational stakeholders. It was really fascinating to see. We were able to identify competencies and abilities that were really important to those in the industry and, what's expected of our graduates of the program. And this also links them to the industry, and we were really successful. The majority of our students did get employment after their placement. So we find the employers were really pleased with the certificates we were, sending them out with, and, the education we were providing them. So that was a really great thing to see the feedback from that. And it made me realize the importance of PAC. So, it really helped provide direction and vision in developing and shaping the content of the course, of course, originally in our outlines. But again, relating to the overarching picture of the program and ultimately, our students getting employed in our community. That was the bigger piece I took away. So my approach is to take the feedback from PAC and other sources back to our team, our program team, for discussion. And of course, the Associate Dean, Carol Burke, is a big piece of that too. And we explore how or if we can even implement some of these feedback ideas. An example would be we had a suggestion regarding a particular certificate that would be beneficial to the graduates in one of our first PAC meetings. because it was becoming an industry standard, the St. Pete's Feeding Certificate. So we looked at the possibility of incorporating the certificate. We also looked at GPA, which is Gentle Persuasive Approach, and we integrated that one as well, and it became really great. The students loved it. They get an actual certificate from that they can take forward, and the employers loved it because they don't have to now train our students. So their certificates they're coming forward with when they graduate are really working. So we were able to integrate that into our curriculum piece with a lot of success, and have had really great feedback from both the students and the placements. So in conclusion, when I look closely at how curriculum is developed and the framework that supports it, the whole process, it really comes alive for me. And I have to admit, previously, it was a bit of a mystery to me in some respects, and I was a little intimidated, but now I get excited when I see how the puzzle comes together. And each aspect plays a role in the final outcome, and it does not seem like such a mystery to me anymore. So I really appreciate that, and this course, I'm really looking forward to learning more. These have been great new faculty development. I'm really enjoying it. This here is a list of the references I use. So I use the ABC curriculum resources from the class and the link that you had given us. And of course yourself, Jacqueline, week 1 lecture, all your lectures, but specifically week 1 is where I took the framework from. And I really enjoy what we've learned so far. So I hope you've enjoyed my podcast and that you can hear my voice okay. And I will see you in class. Thank you so much. Have a great day.